Welcome back to BetterAvecBourbon. Today we have a tasting of Don Fulano. They're a relatively new tequila brand, having started in 2002, but at the heart of their spirit is 140 years of experience across 5 generations of agave farmers and distillers that began in Jalisco, and is distilled at the La Tequileña in Tequila, Jalisco, Mexico. The distillery was purchased by Enrique Fonseca in 1990 from Bacardi after Souza and Jose Cuervo backed out of their deals to buy the Fonseca family's agaves, and they were stuck with 40,000 plus mature agave each year with no one to sell them to. So he bought the distillery, and having no experience with the Alembic pot stills and continuous column stills inside, went to Scotland to learn how to make the well-crafted, complex spirits using both methods, and started making his own tequila, Pura Sangre, followed by several brands including Cierto, Cimarron, and Don Fulano in 2002, where he's a partner alongside his nephews. But let me tell you, Don Fulano is the real deal, and once you try it, you won't want to go back to Don Julio or Celebrity Tequila. For the tasting lineup, we have Don Fulano Blanco, a bright and colorful expression of Highland agave and rich red soil. It's 40% or 80 proof, and is $55 USD a total wine. Don Fulano Reposado, the great representative of the spirit of Don Fulano, selected mature agave and French Limousin oak. It's 40% or 80 proof, and is $64 USD at total wine. And Don Fulano Añejo, a marriage of very old tequilas, full of spice with an underlying cooked agave sweetness. It's 40% or 80 proof, and is $89 USD at total wine. Don Fulano Fuerte, the original overproof, hailed by connoisseurs as one of the greatest of all time. It's 40% or 80 proof, and is $66 USD at total wine. This makes up the full Don Fulano lineup, excluding Don Fulano Imperial, their 5-year-old Añejo. Once you've picked up your tequila, get some Glencairns, and let's get to it. Don Fulano's tequila is unique, and unlike most distillers, Don Fulano manages the whole tequila making process from farm to bottle. They farm their own blue agave, selecting only the best mature and overripe agave, over a period of up to 2 years, rotating crops twice between each agave harvest per plot. They then take the selected blue agave piñas, steam them at low pressure, and let them rest for 12 hours, which breaks down complex sugars into simple sugars ready for fermentation. The steamed agaves are then juiced with a mix of mosto and bagasse. The juice and a small portion of the fibers that are left behind are added to open fermentation tanks for natural fermentation into agave wine, hovering around 6 to 9%. They then heat this wine up to a slow boil until they're left with only the essence of the tequila. Of the essence, 80 to 85% of the spirit comes with double distillate produced in copper alembics, and the remaining 15 to 20% from the double column copper coffee distillate. Say that 5 times fast, in an effort to balance the richer flavors of the double distillate. Don Fulano then goes on to be aged in ex-wine European dark oak barrels from the Burgundy and Bordeaux regions, among other wine regions. They then mature their tequila at different altitudes for deeper complexity and unique blending. The blends are then taste tested by a panel alongside previous batches of the same expression. Once a batch is approved and is profiled, it will then sit to combine further for another 3 to 6 months before bottling. Admittedly, I've been a bit of a doubter when it comes to what I'd call the tequila tax, as what I'd classify as a good Blanco tequila is typically double the cost of what I'd classify as a good bourbon, despite most bourbons being aged at least 7 years. But learning more about how much effort is put into the full process and trying a brand like Don Fulano, I better understand the price point and the value of the spirit more generally. Though I do still wish it was closer to bourbon costs for the sake of my wallet. Now that we've had the history and the overview of the distilling process, let's get to the tasting. Starting off with the Blanco. For aroma, they have it's fresh on the nose, and yet profound with a beautiful elegance. It is balanced by a light, herbaceous, and a butterscotch oiliness. For my nose, I have butterscotch, slight citrus, some saltiness, but smells extremely smooth. Next, the Fuerte Still Strength Blanco. For aroma, they have profoundly aromatic, full of spice and flavor, and yet mellow with floral glimmers of jasmine and orange blossom. Full-bodied and generous in its complexity. For my nose, heavy agave, less citrus but an almost peppery note comes out. Next, the Reposado. For aroma, they have cooked agave fully expresses, blending seamlessly with an herbal sweetness, hints of mature fruit compote, and dark chocolate. For my nose, the aging does wonders. The butterscotch of the agave is still there, what they're calling the cooked agave, but there's a vanilla and baked goods richness that I quite enjoy. For the añejo, for aroma they have it's deep and complex with dried fruits, and spice elements that emerge from a long finish with a refreshing light menthol. For me, I get the rich butterscotch and caramel nose of the agave with a pinch of vanilla. I don't detect much of the dried fruits past the caramel and vanilla hallmarks of the aging. Now for the taste. With the Blanco, they list the notes as cooked agave, grilled pineapple, wet cement, grass, and butterscotch. For myself, I get the butterscotch and fruitiness of the agave, cinnamon, and some citrus and salt at the back of the palate. For the Fuerte, they list cooked agave, raspberry, orange blossom, cinnamon, mint, and black pepper. For my taste, a much richer agave flavor from the Blanco, black pepper, and a complex fruitiness on the back palate, but that's mostly muted by the proofiness for me. For the Reposado, they list cooked agave, mature fruit compote, aniseed, white pepper, and dark chocolate. For my taste, I get cooked agave for sure, a bit more vanilla than dark chocolate, a signature Don Fulano peppery taste, and I do get a very tame anise flavor, which is good since I'm not huge on black licorice, but it does work here. And lastly, the añejo. They list cooked agave, dried peaches, clove, cardamom, roasted macadamia, and tobacco. Similar to the aroma, I get rich butterscotch, caramel, and some vanilla. There is a fruitiness, but I actually find I prefer this less than the Reposado. I think the aging has actually muted some of the more complex flavors that stand out more in the Reposado. These are all delicious, and I can confidently say, move out of the way, Don Julio, a new Don is in town. From the tasting, the standouts for me were definitely the Fuerte and Reposado. Delicious, bright, not too sweet, but you also don't get the sharpness that usually comes with low-aged spirits. You can't go wrong with the original Blanco. I love it in a margarita, so expect to see that in a future video. I did enjoy the añejo, but I find sometimes with añejo, the aging leans a bit closer to an aged bourbon flavor, which makes me wish I was having a bourbon instead, but that's just my palate, and I still want to experiment further with añejos. Thanks everyone for watching. What's your favorite tequila brand, and what are your thoughts on añejos? Let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, hit that like button, press subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.